They should frame this quarter in Cupertino. I mean, if you look at, given the chip shortage, to have a number that's called a $5 billion beat, and especially those iPhones, that would have been another $6 billion beat if not for the chip shortage, all around from margins across the board. It just shows Teflon-like in terms of navigating the chip shortage. This is beyond what bulls were hoping for. Obviously, it comes down to guidance, but this is a life raft in a market storm, a huge quarter from Cook and Cupertino.
Mike Santoli makes a big difference as well to broad sentiment and valuations overnight.
Well, it does. I mean, obviously, what you're paying for is steadiness. You're paying for $100 billion in net income per year. That's what they're on pace for again. So I do think it is very solid across the board. I'm not sure that Apple, because it is so unique and so dominant, has really coattails in terms of the rest of tech sort of taking heart in their performance. Apple is as Apple does, as opposed to necessarily being a direct bellwether. But it's certainly not going to hurt sentiment that this operating environment was good enough for them to perform like this.
Strong sales growth across the board. Let's get back to Julia Boorstin for more on Apple's results. Julia.
Well, Sarah, I spoke to Apple CEO Tim Cook about this record quarter. Now, the company didn't give any guidance, but I asked him about sales trends over the course of the quarter for that better than expected iPhone growth in particular. On iPhone demand, Tim Cook told me, quote, the last 2 weeks of the quarter were the best 2 weeks for iPhone customer demand during the quarter. He said that's not odd because that is associated with gift giving, but it bodes well to the momentum. We grew by 9% for the quarter, which we were proud of, and that's despite having supply constraints during the quarter. I also asked Tim Cook about the biggest pain points for the supply chain, which he said is constraints on chip supply, particularly with legacy nodes, that has the largest impact on iPads. He told me, quote, the good news, if there is good news in here, is that the December quarter was worse than the previous quarter, but we're projecting March to be better than the December quarter, and that's in terms of supply constraints. I also asked him about how they're reacting to inflationary pressures if they plan to raise prices. He said that they try to price their products based on their value that they deliver. And it sounds like we could hear more about those inflationary pressures on the call, and that call does start at the top of the hour. Guys?
Julia Boorstin, very valuable. Thank you. Up about 2% after hours. Colin, so for a company that didn't give guidance, Cook gave Julia some good color as to what they were seeing the last 2 weeks. The best for demand, makes sense with gift giving, but does bode well for momentum. Do you expect them to get into more detail as far as the outlook, or Apple just doesn't do that anymore?
They don't do that anymore, but what we do know is that clearly there's still strong demand for the iPhone. And what's even more impressive is that we're seeing Apple and Tim Cook doing what they do best, which is releasing a new phone and then driving those margins higher, right? Taking advantage of the consistent form factors, that 43.8% gross margin, that's a fantastic print. And so demand is not an issue for Apple, particularly for the iPhone.